Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. On this big picture, I'd like to talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, common sense. After that, we'll see, with any luck, a few videos that you'll find interesting and hopefully entertaining. First, the common sense part. There are a few states that have recently passed laws or want laws that would allow children of pretty much any age to undergo gender-changing surgeries or treatments that will affect these kids for the rest of their lives. Kids of any age, without permission from parents. They're able to go to authorities and demand life-altering treatments. Indeed, in some states, such as California, legislators have passed laws that would remove children from parents who object to their child's gender choices. Did you hear that? If a parent in California says, "My son or daughter was born a boy or a girl, and they're too young to make any decision about whether or not they want to change that," the state, the all-powerful state of California, wants to be able to say, "No, your child knows better than you, the parent. They know what's best for them for the rest of their lives, even if they're only 10 years old. So we're going to side with the child, and you lose your rights as a parent. Not only that, we're going to take the kid away from you on top of it." Common sense. How about in Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer? She just signed a law, a ban on marriage for anyone under the age of 18. Because, of course, at that age, you're way too young to make such an important decision, such a tender age, right? Well, in Governor Whitmer's version of common sense, it follows that kids of any age can have gender-altering treatments without permission, I might add, from any parental or other adult. Now, my friends, that is the peak of a responsible government leader's version of common sense. Now, before you decide to label Governor Whitmer as the lone nut in the realm of absurd bureaucratic decision makers, feast your eyes on this tidbit. That's right, folks, our chief governing nut in charge in June decided that our state should accept any child from any other state who wants to get away from their parents' oppressive desire to prevent said child from chopping off various unwanted body parts. Of course, that kid will have to go somewhere else to get married, but I digress. Listen, folks, I don't want to make this into a political thing, a Democrat or Republican thing. In fact, I'm seeing less and less difference these days between those two parties. Is Mitch McConnell any different than Nancy Pelosi? No. This is about a culture war, a war on traditional values and what makes sense in the world. It's about why we are in this fight to begin with. Why? Well, there are forces in the world that hate America. I know that sounds a little paranoid, maybe even naive, but for just under 200 years, Marxists and socialists have had this thing about disrupting society, creating chaos in order to overthrow the traditional. Order and status quo are the enemies of Marxism. Socialists have a very well-defined formula. The first thing any Marxist movement will do as they move into an area is attack religion. After all, God is a threat, a rival. You can't have God or your priest or your rabbi telling you what's moral, what the rules are. Not if the Marxists want to have their way. So God has to go. Next, there's no room in a Marxist paradise for family. The family structure is a threat too. You can't have mom or dad giving kids moral values, a sense of right and wrong, when the government has to have that all-important function. Family, obsolete. Big brother, government. They'll give you the place to live, food. They're going to take care of your health and medical needs. They'll even give you a phone so you can keep in touch with all your friends and tell them how easy life is. Yep, one big happy family. Marriage, fathers living in the house, way, way overrated, right? what's next? Well, how about patriotism? Of course, you can't have a bunch of dead white guys from 250 years ago giving you all these moldy old papers with all kinds of rules and regulations, rights and freedoms. Not when the Marxists want to bring you up to date on their rules for society. So patriotism, that now becomes whatever the socialists say it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Tear down those statues. Make the Constitution, quote unquote, living. Freedom of speech. That becomes freedom of speech that doesn't get you canceled by the thought police. The Second Amendment. That only applies to those well-trained militia, bodyguards that walk alongside governors and other high officials. Freedom of religion. Fine, just don't pray too loud or in the wrong place, because even though those mostly peaceful protesters can parade around at will, call for defunding cops, tell you whose lives matter and whose lives don't, if you choose to pray in front of the wrong commercial, shall we say, healthcare facility, you're in for some serious legal questions. So how did the Marxists manage to get away with all this? Surely no country would give in to such obvious degradation. Absolutely not here in the greatest country in the world, right? Well, when the good people of the nation are up to their elbows in financial concerns, they have a few other things on their minds that might take precedence, like food. How about staying dry when it's raining out and the roof needs repair? Yeah, the economy is a great way to channel people into a convenient direction if you're in charge. How do you do that, we might ask? Well, preventing energy from being produced is a good start. Less energy, more expense. Everything runs on energy, the entire economic system. Remember that common sense thing? Why would people put up with that kind of policy? It's crazy, right? We have to go to our enemies to buy energy, to add insult to injury. Venezuela, Saudi Arabia. We're using just as much, just paying more. Yeah, right? Well, if you tell people that the world is coming to an end, then really, how can any reasonable person object to any solution on the table? We have to save the world, right? I mean, where else are we going to hide if we don't have the world to kick around anymore? Great. That's the ticket. Tell everyone we need to save the earth. Predict that the oceans are going to flood us out of our homes. Get that rowboat ready. Tell us we're going to roast in the coming desert or drowned in those monsoons. And if the predictions don't come true, those predictions from 1985 or 1990 or 2000 or 2010 or any of those 40 or 50 or 60 major predictions, none of which have come true over the last 50 or 60 years, well, double down. Just come up with a new prediction and tell everyone how all the experts, every single one of them, all agree. We're doomed. If you don't agree, that'll do it. Remember, common sense. And now, my friends, enough of the stuff that gets me in trouble with all my coworkers, my friends in the media, the weather guys I've worked with through all the ages. Sorry, guys. Sorry, really. Take a breath. Now for the good stuff. I have a few videos that you might enjoy. The last one you have to stay tuned for. I put that together while I was flying, and it's one of the most calming, relaxing videos I've ever done, which we really need after this. But to start with, here's a guy that I really respect and admire, and he's talking about what's really important in life.
The wisest person I ever met in my life, a third grade dropout. Wisest and dropout in the same sentence is rather oxymoronic, like jumbo shrimp. Like fun run, ain't nothing fun about it. Like Microsoft Works, y'all don't hear me. I used to say like country music, but I've lived in Texas so long, I love country music now. I hunt, I fish, I have cowboy boots and cowboy. Y'all, I'm a black neck redneck. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? No longer oxymoronic for me to say country music. And it's not oxymoronic for me to say third grade and dropout. That third grade dropout, the wisest person I ever met in my life, who taught me to combine knowledge and wisdom to make an impact, was my father. A simple cook. Wisest man I ever met in my life. Just a simple cook. Left school in the third grade to help out on the family farm, but just because he left school doesn't mean his education stopped. Mark Twain once said, "I've never allowed my schooling to get in the way of my education." My father taught himself how to read, taught himself how to write, decided in the midst of Jim Crowism, as America was breathing the last gasp of the Civil War, my father decided he was going to stand and be a man. Not a black man, not a brown man, not a white man, but a man. He literally challenged himself to be the best that he could all the days of his life. I have 4 degrees. My brother is a judge. We're not the smartest ones in our family. It's a third grade dropout daddy. A third grade dropout daddy who was quoting Michelangelo, saying to us, "Boys, I won't have a problem if you aim high and miss, but I'm gonna have a real issue if you aim low and hit." A country mother quoting Henry Ford, saying, "If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right." I learned that from a third grade drop. Simple lessons. Lessons like these. Son, you'd rather be an hour early than a minute late. We never knew what time it was at my house because the clocks were always ahead. My mother said for nearly 30 years my father left the house at 3:45 in the morning. One day she asked him, "Why, Daddy?" He said, "Maybe one of my boys will catch me in the act of excellence. I want to share 2 things with you." Aristotle said, "You are what you repeatedly do." Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act. Don't ever forget that. I know you're tough, but always remember to be kind. Always. Don't ever forget that. Never embarrass mama. Yeah. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If daddy ain't happy, don't nobody care. But you know, I'm trying to tell you. Next lesson. Lesson from a cook over there in the galley. Son, make sure your servant's towel is bigger than your ego. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Y'all might have a relative in mind you want to send that to. Let me say it again. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Pride is the burden of a foolish person. John Wooden coached basketball at UCLA for a living, but his calling was to impact people. And with all those national championships, guess what he was found doing in the middle of the week? Going into the cupboard, grabbing a broom, and sweeping his own gym floor. You want to make an impact? Find your broom. Every day of your life, you find your broom. You grow your influence that way. That way you're attracting people so that you can impact them. Final lesson. Son, if you're gonna do a job, do it right. I've always been told how average I can be. Always been criticized about being average. But I want to tell you something. I stand here before you, before all of these people, not listening to those words, but telling myself every single day to shoot for the stars, to be the best that I can be. Good enough isn't good enough if it can be better, and better isn't good enough if it can be best. Let me close with a very personal story that I think will bring all this into focus. Wisdom will come to you in the unlikeliest of sources, a lot of times through failure. When you hit rock bottom, remember this. While you're struggling, rock bottom can also be a great foundation on which to build and on which to grow. I'm not worried that you'll be successful. I'm worried that you won't fail from time to time. Person that gets up off the canvas and keeps growing, that's the person that will continue to grow their influence. Back in the 70s, to help me make this point, let me introduce you to someone. I met the finest woman I'd ever met in my life. Back in my day, we'd have called her a brick house. This woman was the finest woman I'd ever seen in my life. There's just one little problem. Back then, ladies didn't like big old linemen The Blind Side hadn't come out yet. They like quarterbacks and running backs. We're at this dance, and I find out her name is Trina Williams from Lompoc, California, and we're all dancing, and we're just excited. And I decide in the middle of dancing with her that I would ask her for her phone number. Trina was the first one. Trina was the only woman in college who gave me her real telephone number. The next day, we walked to Baskin & Robbins ice cream parlor. My friends couldn't believe it. This has been 40 years ago, and my friends still can't believe it. We go on a second date, and a third date, and a fourth date. We drive from Chico to Vallejo so that she could meet my parents. My father meets her. My daddy, my hero, he meets her, pulls me to the side and says, "Is she psycho?" But anyway, we go together for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. By now, Trina's a senior in college. I'm still a freshman, but I'm working some things out. I'm so glad I graduated in 4 terms. Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. So now it's time to propose. So I talk to her girlfriends, and it's California, it's in the 70s, so it has to be outside. You have to have a candle, and you have to have, some chocolate. Listen, I'm from the hood. I had a bottle of Boone's Farm wine. That's what I had. She said yes. That was the key. I married the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. Y'all ever been to a wedding, and even before the wedding starts, you hear this? How in the world? And it was coming from my side of the family. We get married, we have a few children, our lives are great. One day, Trina finds a lump in her left breast. Breast cancer. 6 years after that diagnosis, me and my 2 little boys walked up to Mommy's casket. And for 2 years, my heart didn't beat. If it wasn't for my faith in God, I wouldn't be standing here today. If it wasn't for those 2 little boys, there would have been no reason for which to go on. I was completely lost. That was rock bottom. You know what sustained me? The wisdom of a 3rd grade dropout. The wisdom of a simple cook. We're at the casket. I'd never seen my dad cry. But this time I saw my dad cry. That was his daughter. Trina was his daughter, not his daughter-in-law. And I'm right behind my father, about to see her for the last time on this earth. And my father shared 3 words with me that changed my life right there at the casket. It would be the last lesson he would ever teach me. He said, "Son, just stand. You keep standing. You keep standing, no matter how rough the sea, you keep standing." And I'm not talking about just water. You keep standing. No matter what, you don't give up. And as clearly as I'm talking to you today, these were some of her last words to me. She looked me in the eye and she said, "It doesn't matter to me any longer how long I live. What matters to me most is how I live." I ask y'all one question, a question that I was asked all my life by a 3rd grade dropout. How you living? How you living? Every day, ask yourself that question, how you living? Here's what a cook would suggest you to live this way. That you would not judge, that you would show up early, that you'd be kind, that you'd make sure that that servant's towel is huge and used, that if you're gonna do something, you do it the right way. That cook would tell you this, that it's never wrong to do the right thing, that how you do anything is how you do everything. And in that way, you will grow your influence to make an impact. In that way, you will honor all those who have gone before you, who have invested in you. Look in those unlikeliest places for wisdom. Enhance your life every day by seeking that wisdom and asking yourself every night, how am I living? May God richly bless y'all. Thank you for having me.
Now, in keeping with my earlier thoughts on patriotism, this next video goes with the patriotic spirit that many of us were raised with.
if we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land, we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, "My Pledge," he had written these words: "America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone." We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
And now this next video is something I put together while I was flying. And it's just an example of how gorgeous, how beautiful things can be in the perspective when you're in an airplane.